no archbishop would be allowed onto the grounds of the Australian Catholic University to teach central teachings of the Catholic Church. The greatest opponent of abortion in the world today is Pope Francis. So presumably those students would walk out on Pope Francis, in which case the Australian Catholic University should simply auction itself off, donate the proceeds to Mother Teresa's charity, hang its head in shame, and, its leaders should retreat and go and live in a desert monastery and say 20 years of penance.
Do you know what I find extraordinary too? All these student activists front the cameras to talk about how tough it was to sit there and listen to the views of the Catholic Church at a Catholic university, including student unionists and others. And I thought to myself, what Joe de Bruin said was consistent with the Catholic Church, but would also have been very consistent if that had been at a Muslim or Islamic university. Now, of course, all those student activists, and there were gay pride flags and Palestinian T-shirts, they're the same kids that are marching in the streets every Sunday in Melbourne on the pro-Palestinian cause. But if they're upset about what Joe de Bruin said on Catholic faith, that's the same view as Islam on IVF, on abortion, on same-sex marriage. And this is where I just can't see the consistency of intellectual thought with these kids.
Well, that's right, Peter. You make a very fine point, but I'd make an even more fundamental point. Any Catholic university ought to have, as a component of its program, teaching about the teachings of the Catholic Church. Again, you don't have to agree with them. I myself campaigned for a yes vote in the same-sex marriage plebiscite, but I didn't want the Catholic Church to change its teaching. I respectfully and very conscientiously disagreed with the public policy aspect of the Church's teaching. But I didn't want the Church to change its teaching in order to conform to me, nor did I regard it as offensive to hear the Church explain its own teaching. But this is the point I really want to make to you. Catholic liberal arts colleges around the world, in the United States, in Australia, all over the world, typically have a compulsory component of their study, theology or something like that. And if you're at a Catholic institution, the theology course normally means Catholic teaching. It can be very critical, very intellectual, very smart. There was no greater Christian intellectual in the last 100 years than Pope Benedict. And so obviously, if these students were so offended at hearing a normal Catholic layman like Joe de Bruin defend normal Catholic teaching, that would indicate to you that they've never heard it before. So what is the Australian Catholic University doing? What is its purpose if it's never previously exposed its students to Catholic teaching? Why on earth does anybody bother with it? So it needs to reform itself and become bold and proud of its Catholic identity and its Catholic teaching, or it should just shut up shop and go out of business and stop pretending to be something which plainly it isn't.
I think the VC has got a hand in his resignation in the morning. I think he should be pursued on what he has done this week. He should not hold that position. Just before we go, we've got this misinformation legislation in the Parliament. The government wants it rammed through by the end of the year. There's been a whole lot of submissions, but a very significant submissions come in from a group of faith leaders. And it fits with this whole discussion we're just having. They're very concerned that the overall impact of this legislation, if it passes, will be to constrain, basically make illegal, religious speech and debate, particularly online. Fair criticism?
Yes, I think it is. So this is very disturbing legislation. There's a paradox here. We're trying to make the internet subject to the rule of law like everyone else. If Sky TV broadcast a blatant lie, or if my newspaper, The Australian, published a blatant lie, we'd get into all kinds of legal trouble. Whereas you can do that online and have no legal consequence. However, what is a blatant lie is quite clearly defined under the laws of libel and so on. Somebody has to sue you and establish that you've told a falsehood. But we know from social media companies' campaigns in the past, as you pointed out last week, when they censored all kinds of things in the American presidential debate, censored all kinds of things in the COVID era, which turned out to be true, that this this kind of provision can simply be weaponised to censor political opinions which you disagree with. So again, the dear old Catholic Church, or indeed any mainstream Christian community, will have views about, who knows, abortion or, the relation of the sexes or whatever, which, the zeitgeist will decide are false or harmful, and then they will be censored from expressing those views. So the loss of free speech, I think the untamed, wild nature of the internet is a genuine public policy problem. But this very bad legislation would do infinitely more harm than good, and it should simply be rejected by the Parliament.
Yeah, I think it will be a huge fight when Parliament returns. Greg Sheridan, thank you.